BeautySeek is not a medical provider. This is not medical advice. Always consult a licensed professional.
Today, we explore a question that often shows up when we see our reflection. Why are we so hard on ourselves the moment we look in the mirror? Here at BeautySeek, we call this moment the magic mirror, not because reflection is false, but because the mindset it creates can be. I'm Sam, founder of BeautySeek, where we have straight talk so beauty seekers can make informed aesthetic decisions. Our story today is not about vanity. It's about how appearance is processed in a world of constant visual exposure. For many beauty seekers, the experience is automatic. You glance at your reflection, your brain assesses, and within seconds, the assessment turns evaluative. We ask ourselves, what's good and what's wrong? Researchers say this shift from observation to judgment is becoming more common. A 2023 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that frequent visual comparison is associated with increased dissatisfaction and harsher self-evaluation. Importantly, the study does not argue that caring about appearance is the problem. It shows how quickly noticing issues about our self-reflections become verdicts about self-worth. Mirrors, photos, and video calls have turned self-observation into routine. Over time, that evaluative way to do living moves inward. And people don't just see their appearance, they begin to audit it. And audits rarely sound like magic. Researchers studying self-compassion have explored another response. A 2014 study of Albertson and colleagues found that brief self-compassion interventions reduced body dissatisfaction and increased body appreciation. And in this context, self-compassion does not mean avoiding aesthetic choices. It means observation without punishment, care without cruelty. In fact, Cindy Crawford has spoken about wanting to look good for her age without pretending age doesn't exist or criticizing herself for it. Her framing reflects a potential for a broader shift in how we process our reflections. You can care about how you look without being unmagic to yourself. This matters for aesthetic decisions. Research shows decisions made under self-criticism feel pressured and emotionally loaded. Decisions made from steadier self-assessment tend to feel clearer and more durable. Experts suggest a simple internal check. When you look in the mirror, are you gathering information or delivering a verdict? That distinction shapes everything that follows, including electing aesthetic procedures and treatments. In the next episode, we'll examine how visual distortion enters the self-observation process. Are filters and edited images quietly changing what we think needs fixing? This Magic Mirror series isn't a story about technology being good or bad. It's about how perception adapts to repetition. For many beauty seekers, comparison no longer starts in real life. It starts on screens. Edited faces appear constantly. Optimized lighting becomes expected. Smoothness becomes status quo. Over time, human images stop looking beyond realistic. Rather, they begin to feel normal. In a 2020 experimental study published in the journal Body Image, researchers studied just over 300 women between the ages of 18 and 26. Participants were randomly assigned to spend 7 minutes on Instagram, 7 minutes on Facebook, or 7 minutes on a non-social task. Immediately afterward, they answered questions about how much they found themselves comparing their appearance to others and how satisfied they felt with their own appearance. Those in the Instagram group scored higher on appearance comparison and lower on body satisfaction, meaning they were more likely to judge their own looks against others and feel worse about what they saw, despite no change in their physical appearance in just 7 minutes. The effect wasn't about becoming less beautiful. It was about becoming more critical. Filters are designed to enhance, but over time, enhancement becomes distortion. Skin texture disappears, symmetry increases. When altered images become reference points for aesthetic beauty, real anatomy can begin to feel inadequate. Not because our bodies changed, but because what we are comparing ourselves to changed. In a 2021 review published in the Journal of Prevention, researchers looked at 17 studies involving more than 7,000 kids and teens and found something surprisingly simple. When we're taught how media images are created and idealized, we tend to feel better about our own bodies. Education like this doesn't make us blind to media. Rather, it helps us see aesthetic beauty through a critical filter. From my standpoint, the takeaway isn't about age or social media habits. It's about what happens in the moments in front of our magic mirrors. These moments become easier to navigate when we recognize that many of the standards shaping self-judgment were never even neutral to begin with. Ryan Gosling has spoken about the difference between how things are designed to look on screen and how they feel in real life. Kudos to him for noting that distinction because it matters. Aesthetic decisions rely on reference points, and when reference points are distorted, urgency increases. Experts suggest one grounding question: are you responding to real imagery or to edited images that may be morphing your expectations? In our next episode on Beauty Seek, we'll explore what often follows comparison. For example, if I change this, will it actually help, or will my focus of beauty keep shifting? Aesthetic changes can improve satisfaction with a specific feature. Research supports that, but emotional relief is different. In 2018, researchers published a study in Aesthetic Surgery Journal examining how preoperative psychological distress relates to postoperative satisfaction among cosmetic surgery patients. The study followed 213 adults, predominantly women, average age in the middle 30s to 40s, undergoing elective cosmetic procedures, and assessed them before surgery for anxiety, body image concerns, depression, and unrealistic expectations. 6 months after surgery, the researchers evaluated both technical outcomes, as judged by surgeons, and patient-reported emotional and satisfaction outcomes. The results showed that patients with higher preoperative psychological distress and unmet emotional expectations were significantly more likely to report ongoing dissatisfaction and emotional distress after surgery, even when the physical outcome was technically successful and rated positively by clinicians. The study concluded that physical success does not automatically translate to emotional satisfaction. How someone enters the surgical process psychologically matters just as much as how the surgery is performed. In other words, the procedure may succeed. The feeling of dissatisfaction we hoped would disappear may not. Aesthetic procedures can certainly refine features. They can restore proportion. They can address specific concerns. They cannot resolve self-worth. Brooke Shields has spoken candidly about the difference between changing how you look and changing how you feel. In an interview with Vogue, reflecting on aging and beauty decisions over time, she said, "I realized that changing the outside doesn't fix what's going on inside." What makes her perspective resonate isn't rejection of beauty care, it's clarity about its limits. Shields has consistently framed aesthetic choices as something that can support confidence and expression, but not replace emotional grounding. Her experience reflects a simple truth: changing how you look can help with specific concerns, but it doesn't automatically change how you feel. Before moving forward, experts suggest clarifying one thing. Are you electing this aesthetic change to improve a feature or to change how you feel about yourself? That answer often predicts satisfaction. Next, we'll look at what research shows about decisions that aesthetic patients don't regret. Regret after an aesthetic procedure is often misunderstood. Research shows that regret is rarely about choosing the wrong procedure. It's about how the decision was made. In a 2021 study published in Facial Plastic Surgery and Aesthetic Medicine, researchers developed and validated the aesthetic procedure expectations aspect scale by surveying nearly 200 adults, predominantly women, average age 45, seeking cosmetic treatments in Australia. The scale assessed both intrinsic expectations, for example, I want to feel more confident about my appearance, and extrinsic expectations, for example, I expect this to improve my relationship or social opportunities. Higher scores on the extrinsic and unrealistic expectations were associated with greater psychological distress and a higher likelihood of dissatisfaction after treatment, even when the procedures achieved their physical goals. The research points to something simple but powerful. Regret is less about what was changed and more about why. When expectations are intrinsic, focused on a specific feature or a personal sense of alignment, satisfaction is more likely to hold. When expectations are extrinsic, tied to approval, relationships, or the hope that a procedure will resolve deeper emotional discomfort, well, dissatisfaction is more likely to linger, even when the physical outcome is successful. Jane Fonda has spoken candidly about this, reflecting on her own cosmetic surgery. She said, on one level, I hate the fact that I've had the need to alter myself physically to feel that I'm okay. I wish I wasn't like that. Her regret wasn't about changing her appearance, it was about crossing an internal boundary before she fully understood what she was asking the change to do for her emotionally. That's where regret resistant beauty decisions tend to begin, not with a mirror and not with a promise, but with honest questions we're willing to answer before electing an aesthetic procedure. Am I trying to change how I look or how I hope to feel? And do I understand the difference before I decide? When those answers are clear, the magic mirror becomes a place of recognition, not regret. Next, we'll look at something quieter, but just as influential, how your internal conversation with yourself is structured while you're debating an aesthetic procedure. Aesthetic decisions rarely happen in silence. Researchers call internal language a key factor in judgment. And Dr. David Sawir, PhD, one of the most widely cited psychologists in aesthetic medicine, has spent decades studying why some patients feel satisfied after cosmetic procedures while others don't. Across his work, a consistent theme emerges. Outcomes are strongly influenced by how patients frame their expectations internally before they ever step into a consultation. Sawir has noticed that patients who describe their appearance concerns in absolute self-critical terms, language like, this will finally make me okay, or I can't feel confident until this is fixed, are more likely to struggle emotionally afterward, even when the procedure is technically successful. In contrast, patients who speak about a specific procedure in measured, grounded terms tend to report satisfaction. What Sawir is really listening for isn't just motivation, it's the tone and pressure of the internal conversation patients are already having with themselves. Surgeons associated with professional organizations like the Aesthetic Society emphasize that phrases signaling urgency or emotional rescue, I should have this done years ago, I'm running out of time, I just need this to feel okay, often predict regret post-procedure. Urgent language compresses time to weigh authentic decisions. Neutral self-talk sounds different. I'm allowed to take time. I can gather more information. This decision shouldn't support my life. Kaylee Kuoko, who I love, what a talent, has been unusually straightforward about aesthetic decisions she doesn't regret. In interviews with Women's Health, she's talked openly about having a nose job early in her career and later choosing breast augmentation. Years passed between those decisions and her reflections on them, and her tone never shifted toward apology or embarrassment. Instead, she explained the choice plainly. I did it for me, she said. I didn't do it for a man or anyone else. To me, what stands out isn't the procedures themselves, but the internal framing she describes. No urgency, no self criticism, no promise that the changes would fix something deeper. Over time, she continued to speak about those decisions without regret, suggesting that her internal conversations guiding those decisions were steady enough to hold up long after the mirror changed. Before finalizing an aesthetic decision, experts suggest listening closely. Is the voice in your head helping you think or pushing you to act? Next, in our final Magic Mirror episode, we address the question underlying all other questions. How do you pursue aesthetics without tying your worth to the result? What we're really covering in this report isn't procedures. It's what we expect the result of an aesthetic procedure to do for us emotionally. Psychologists call this appearance contingent self-worth. In a 2017 study published in Body Image, researchers looked at how people who feel fundamentally respectful toward their bodies make decisions and feel about those decisions over time. The study followed nearly 400 adults across a wide range and asked them simple questions about how they related to their bodies day to day, not whether they loved how they looked, but whether they treated their bodies with acceptance and care. The pattern was consistent. People with higher body appreciation, meaning they could acknowledge flaws without defining themselves by them, tended to make healthier, more thoughtful decisions about appearance. They were less reactive, less driven by comparison, and more likely to feel satisfied with the aesthetic choices they made later on. Those with low body appreciation were more likely to feel pressure, anxiety, and lingering dissatisfaction, even after making the changes. The difference wasn't whether change occurred, it was whether worth was placed on the outcome. Jamie Lee Curtis has spoke openly about an early cosmetic procedure she later regretted, not because it went technically wrong, but because of what it set in motion internally. In an interview with The Guardian, she reflected on having cosmetic surgery in her 20s and said, I regret it immediately. It started a cycle of self-rejection that I'm dealing with. What stands out in her statement is that the regret wasn't about vanity or medicine. It was about tying her sense of self-worth to changing how she looked. Looking back, Curtis framed the experience as a turning point that taught her something lasting. When appearance becomes a solution to self-worth, relief is short-lived. Her story echoes what research now shows: aesthetic change can't carry the emotional weight of self-acceptance on its own. This concludes the Magic Mirror series. Across the series, one message has stayed consistent. Satisfaction lasts when aesthetic choices support who you already are, not when they're asked to redefine your worth or emotional well-being. With a stable sense of self, even ongoing aesthetic decisions can fit comfortably without pressure into your life. And at their best, aesthetic choices reinforce confidence rather than carry it. If you're open to sharing your story about an aesthetic procedure or treatment, comment, share story. We may interview for an upcoming episode right here on Beauty Seek.